this is the way we make these kind of decisions in NATO, is that the politicians, they set out the guidelines, the direction, then we task our military commanders to give advice on how to follow up, and then we make final decisions as politicians based on these advice and input from our military commanders. This was exactly the same we did back in 2016, when we at the Warsaw summit made historic decisions for the first time in our history to deploy NATO combat troops to the eastern part of the lines. You have to remember that before Ukraine, also before the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014 by Russia, NATO had no combat troops in the eastern part of the lines. Then we had the illegal annexation of Crimea, and since 2014 we have implemented the biggest reinforcement of our collective defense since the end of the Cold War, tripling the size of the NATO Response Force, establishing the battle groups in the Baltic countries and Poland, more presence in the air, at sea, and of course also started to invest more, increasing defense spending. Then the process was the same. The politicians tasked the commanders, they provided advice, and based on that we developed the final conclusions that Allied heads of state and government made at the summit in 2016. And then since then we have implemented that. I foresee a similar process now. We have tasked the military commanders. We will have their advice within weeks, and then my ambition is that heads of state and government, when they meet at the end of June, can make the decisions on significantly increased presence, reinforcing our deterrence and defense on land, at sea and in the air. And of course this will then depend on the input we get from the commanders, but also of course at the end of the day it has to be a political decision by the leaders. So the decision I foresee within months, as meaning by the summit in June. Then implementation will of course vary a bit depending on what kind of decisions we are going to make.